Alright, now that we've discussed the ballistics of the ballistic and the trajectory differences of the Kar 98 and the Mosin Nagant, I thought I'd touch on more of the ergonomics of the weapons and the trigger pull, finally, of the weapons. When you, as I zoom down here to the Mauser, or the Kar 98K, the action on the Kar 98K is very slick. Comes back very slick. Never has, or very rarely has, problems with ammunition extractions of the 8mm ammunition. And when you set that aside, the Mosin Nagant here is much harder. It's very easy to do with two hands, not very easy to do with one hand trying to hold a webcam. The action on it can stick, it can jam using 7.62 by 5.4 ammunition. The weapon can jam cartridges, seize the bolt, the action can seize, and a lot of the ammunition, the Russian ammunition, is not of the quality of the German ammunition, and it can seize the bolt and cause extraction problems. So the Russians had a inherent disadvantage there as well with the extraction of the bullets, 7.62 by 5.4 bullets in their Mosin Nagants. And both of these weapons, I failed to mention this before. If you know anything about the Mosin Nagant and the Mauser, you know that they, you can't see that very well, I'm sorry. Both the Mauser and the Kar 98, I have to set this down here for just a sec. Both the Mauser and the Kar 98 have graduated sights that are sighted out to approximately 200 yards. So they compensate for the trajectory and the ballistics of the weapons, but it's a lot harder to hit a man-sized target at 500 yards or 400 yards, for that matter, with a Mosin Nagant than with a Kar 98, that's for sure, based on the bullet trajectories that I had just mentioned. Going back to the probably the second most important feature or disparity between the Mosin Nagant and the Kar 98 is the trigger. The trigger, if I can set this rifle down without dinging a hole in the table here. The trigger on this Mosin Nagant, you can't see that very well, but the trigger pull on the Mosin Nagant is horrendous. It is not quite horrendous, but it is not nearly as smooth as the Kar 98's trigger. If I cycle this, the trigger has a lot more pull to it. I don't know the exact poundage. I'm sure there's figures online you can look up for the poundage of the triggers. But the Kar 98 has a much smoother trigger. Trigger pull. Much smoother trigger pull, and that will make a world of difference when you're in a combat situation trying to fire out at a man-sized target at 400 or 500 yards, because the entire rifle will move, and the Kar 98 has a definite advantage over the Mosin Nagant over that. So basically, the trigger is better. Magazine capacity is roughly equivalent. If I move this in, you'll be able to see a little bit better. Their magazine capacity, 5 rounds each, roughly equivalent. Roughly equivalent is equivalent. Each of the weapons has 5-round capacity. The trigger on the Kar 98 is totally superior to the poundage of the trigger pull on the Mosin Nagant. The bolt is over complicated. Simple bolt on the Car 98. The basically the bayonet on the bayonet at the end of the Mosin Nagant is inferior to the Car 98, both in terms of length, both in terms of quality, and it is extremely hard to remove from the rifle, like I said before, whereas the Mauser, the Car 98 cuts, has a very easy slide retracting bayonet. The bolt, another feature which I forgot to mention before while I'm doing the recap here, the bolt on the Mosin Nagant, when using that PU scope, or when using the when using the PU scope on the Mosin Nagant, the 3.5 or 4 magnification scope on the PU on the Mosin Nagant, you have to get a separate bolt handle for the Mosin Nagant, and like I said, here is another demonstration of how it's a little hard to turn the bolt handle. I have to hold. It's a little hard to do. It's very easy to do with 2 hands, but trying to demonstrate it is a little harder. The bolt handle, the bolt sticks straight out, and when you have a sniper scope on a PU, which affixes to the Mosin Nagant, it goes up and over. The bolt will interfere with and the shell ejection will interfere with the scope, which means that you have to get a new bolt, basically, or a new or modify a new section of the bolt, because it's in the Mosin Nagant's case, it's got several parts to it, but you're going to have to get a bolt that faces down, more like the Car 98's, so that it doesn't interfere with the scope, whereas the Car 98 already comes with a bolt that is down like that, all ready for a sniper scope, so you don't have to get a special bolt or solder or anything like that to change the bolt on the Car 98. It's ready for sniper use. And the optics, like I said, that were available at the German Wehrmacht, the SS, were superior to anything the Russians had mass-produced. The trigger pull was better. Basically, all around a much better, much more harder hitting. Not so much more harder hitting than the Mosin Nagant proportionately, but fraction of an inch in diameter, a better hitter than the Mosin Nagant in terms of diameter, more accurate in the 400 to 500 plus yard range. Kind of a nominal difference in the 100 to 200 yard range. It's about the same, but the submachine guns, which they had developed more towards such as the MP40 and the subsequent assault rifles, were built to address that issue, which is beyond the scope of this comparison between the Mosin Nagant and the Car 98. But practically speaking, in the ranges which these rifles were designed for, the Car 98 was far superior to the Mosin Nagant in terms of trajectory and ballistics. Past about 400 yards, 400 to 500 yards, much better. 500 yards, definitely at 500 yards, much better weapon. So, I think that just about covers it for the comparison between the Car 98 and the Mosin Nagant.